My wife thought I had only days to live. She didn't know my best friend had already discovered her secret. The doctor told me I might not have much time left. I was sitting alone in a small examination room, staring at the floor, while the sound of the clock on the wall seemed louder than it had ever been. "Mr. Carter," the doctor said gently, "we need to prepare for the possibility that this condition is more serious than we initially thought." I looked up at him. "How serious?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Very serious." For a moment, I couldn't hear anything else. I thought about my life, my business, the house I had spent nearly 30 years paying for, the classic car sitting beneath its cover in my garage, the garden my late father had helped me create, and most of all, my family, my wife, Margaret, my stepdaughter, Chloe. I had always believed they were the two people who would stand beside me when life became difficult. I had no idea that within 24 hours, I would hear a conversation that would make me question everything I thought I knew about them. The doctor continued explaining the tests. There would be more examinations, more scans, more blood work. But the first diagnosis was frightening enough. I asked him directly, "How much time do I have?" He looked uncomfortable. "We don't know yet." That answer was somehow worse than a number. Because when someone tells you that you have 3 months, you can count the days. When someone tells you that you have 3 days, you can say goodbye. But when they tell you they don't know, your mind imagines the worst. I drove home slowly that afternoon. I didn't tell Margaret everything. I told her the doctors were concerned. I told her I needed more tests. She listened. At least, that's what it looked like. She sat beside me on the sofa and held my hand. "Everything will be fine," she whispered. I looked at her. I wanted to believe her. After 30 years of marriage, I thought I knew the difference between fear and love. But that evening, I wasn't so sure. Because when Margaret thought I had fallen asleep, she leaned closer to me. And she whispered something that I was never supposed to hear. "Just a few more days." My eyes remained closed. I didn't move. Then she continued, "After that, everything changes." My heart began pounding. I kept pretending to sleep. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps. Chloe, my stepdaughter. She had come into the room. "Is he asleep?" "Yes," Margaret whispered. "Did the doctor say anything else?" "No." "Are you sure?" Margaret sighed. "He doesn't know." There was a pause. Then Chloe asked the question that made my blood run cold. "What happens to the Corvette?" I almost opened my eyes. My 1967 Chevrolet Corvette. The car I had restored piece by piece. The car my father had once promised to help me buy. The car I had spent years searching for. The car was worth a considerable amount of money. But to me, it was worth much more than that. It carried memories. My father's fingerprints were still on the old toolbox I had used during the restoration. I had planned to leave the car to my nephew one day. But Chloe knew none of that. She only knew what the car was worth. Margaret answered quietly, "Don't worry about the car. I want to know. You'll get it." I felt something inside me break. Chloe laughed softly. "Seriously?" "Yes." "What about the house?" Margaret's voice became even quieter. "Everything will be taken care of." My breathing nearly stopped. Chloe asked, "Did he change the will?" "No." "Then we're safe." Margaret didn't answer immediately. That silence told me more than words could have. Finally, she said, "We have to be careful." I lay perfectly still. My eyes remained closed. But my mind was racing. My wife and my stepdaughter weren't discussing my recovery. They weren't talking about my treatment. They weren't wondering whether I was scared. They were discussing what would happen after I died. And they were already dividing up my belongings. I heard Chloe whisper. "How long?" Margaret replied. 3 days. 3 days. I had no idea what they meant. Maybe the doctors had told Margaret something they hadn't told me. Maybe my condition really was that bad. Or maybe they were waiting for something else. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I opened my eyes. The room was dark. My hands were shaking. I sat up slowly. For 30 years, I had trusted my wife. For more than 20 years, I had treated Chloe as my own daughter. I had paid for her university, helped her start her business, bought her first car. I had even stood beside her at her wedding. I had never once called her my stepdaughter when introducing her. She was my daughter. At least, that's what I thought. I looked around my bedroom. Every photograph on the walls suddenly seemed different. The family holidays, the birthdays, the Christmas mornings. Had any of it been real? Or had I simply been useful? The next morning, I called the one person I knew I could trust. His name was Samuel Reed. Samuel had worked for me for 24 years. He had started as a gardener when my business was small. Over time, he had become much more than an employee. He was my friend, my confidant, the kind of man who never spoke unnecessarily. When my father died, Samuel had been there. When my first business failed, Samuel had helped me rebuild. When Margaret and I married, Samuel had been one of the first people I invited. If there was anyone in the world I trusted, it was him. I called him. "Samuel. Mr. Carter, come to the house." There was a pause. "Is something wrong?" "I don't know." That's not an answer. I looked toward the hallway. "Just come." He arrived 40 minutes later. I took him into my study. I closed the door. Then I told him everything. The diagnosis, the conversation, the Corvette, the house, the 3 days. Samuel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back. "Do you want my honest opinion?" "Yes. I think they're waiting for something." "That's what I think." "Then we need to find out what." I looked at him. "How?" Samuel leaned forward. "First, you need to find out exactly what the doctors know." I nodded. Then we find out what your wife thinks she knows." I stared at him. He continued. "Because if she believes you're going to die in 3 days, there is a reason." That sentence stayed with me. I returned to the hospital that afternoon. A different doctor reviewed my records. Then another specialist examined me. Hours passed. Finally, the specialist sat across from me. He looked confused. "Mr. Carter, I'm not sure how this diagnosis was reached." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" He looked through my results. "Your condition is serious." I swallowed. But you are not dying in 3 days." I stared at him. He continued. "You have a medical problem that requires treatment. It's not something to ignore." "How long do I have?" "With proper care. Potentially many years." I couldn't speak. I sat there in silence. The room seemed to spin. Then I remembered Margaret's words. "Just a few more days." I suddenly understood. The original doctor hadn't told my family that I had 3 days to live. So why did Margaret believe that? I asked the specialist. Could the original doctor have misunderstood my test results? It's possible. Could someone have intentionally exaggerated what the doctor said? He looked at me. "I suppose that's possible too." I thanked him. Then I walked out of the hospital. I didn't go home immediately. I sat in my car. For the first time since the diagnosis, I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I finally understood. My family thought I was dying. But I wasn't. And they had no idea that I knew they were planning for my death. I called Samuel. "Well," I said, "I have some good news." "What?" "I'm not dying." Silence. Then Samuel laughed. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh in days. "That's excellent news. There's more." "What?" "I think my wife and daughter believe I'm going to die." Samuel stopped laughing. "Why?" "I'll explain when I see you." We met that evening in my office. I told him everything. Samuel listened. Then he asked, "What do you want to do?" I looked at him. "Nothing." He raised an eyebrow. "Nothing. Not yet." "Why?" "Because I want to know exactly what they're planning." Samuel nodded. That was the beginning. The next morning, I changed my behavior. I became weaker, more confused, more tired. I told Margaret I wasn't feeling well. She immediately became attentive. Too attentive. She asked whether I'd spoken to the doctor. I told her no. She asked whether I had made any arrangements. I said I was too exhausted to think about it. Her expression changed. For a moment, I saw relief. It was subtle, but I saw it. I told her I wanted to rest. She left. I waited. Then I called Samuel. "Come over." He arrived later that afternoon. I gave him a key to the house. "Why do you need this?" he asked. "Because I need you to watch." "Watch what?" "Everything." Over the next few days, Samuel began noticing things I had missed. Margaret was making phone calls. Chloe was visiting lawyers. Documents were being delivered. My financial advisor received unusual requests. Someone had contacted my insurance company. Someone else had asked about the ownership of the Corvette. The more Samuel discovered, the worse it became. But there was one thing neither of us understood. Why 3 days? Why was Margaret so certain? Then Samuel found something. He called me late one evening. "Mr. Carter?" "What is it?" "I found a name." "Whose?" "Dr. Allen." I froze. "Who is Dr. Allen?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." The next day, Samuel discovered that Dr. Allen had been in contact with Margaret. Not once. Several times. The calls had started weeks before my diagnosis. I couldn't understand it. Then we found the connection. Dr. Allen wasn't my doctor. He was a private consultant. And according to Samuel's research, he had been involved in a financial dispute with my wife. I felt sick. Why would my wife be speaking to him? Samuel didn't answer. Because we both knew the answer might be something terrible. That night, I confronted Margaret indirectly. I asked her about the doctor. She looked at me. "What doctor?" "Dr. Allen." Her face changed. Only for a second. But I saw it. "Why are you asking?" "I heard his name." "Where?" "I don't remember." She stood up. "You're imagining things." I smiled. "Maybe." Then I watched her walk away. That was when I knew. She was hiding something. The following week, I received a call from my solicitor. His name was Daniel Brooks. "Mr. Carter, I need to speak with you." "About what?" "There has been an inquiry regarding your estate." "From whom?" He hesitated. "Your wife." I closed my eyes. What did she ask? She wanted to know whether your current will was still valid. And I told her I couldn't discuss your private affairs. I thanked him. Then I called Samuel. Things were moving faster. My wife wasn't waiting for me to die. She was preparing for it. And someone was helping her. But there was another problem. The more we investigated, the more I realized that my wife wasn't the mastermind. Chloe was. My stepdaughter had debts. Huge debts. Her business was failing. She owed money to multiple creditors. And my house was the solution. If I died, She believed the property would eventually become hers. But there was something she didn't know. The house wasn't entirely mine. It was protected by a family trust. My father had created it before he died. I had forgotten about the details because I had never needed to use it. But Daniel reminded me. Your wife cannot simply take the property. Why not? Because the trust has restrictions. What about Chloe? She has no direct claim. I sat back. Then I asked, what happens if they try? Daniel smiled. Then they expose themselves. That was when I decided to stop defending myself quietly. I was going to let them make their move. And then, I would show them the truth. The opportunity came 3 days later. Margaret walked into my study. She was holding a folder. You need to sign these. I looked at her. What are they? Medical documents. Why? Just paperwork. I opened the folder. It wasn't medical paperwork. It was a power of attorney. I looked at her. Why do I need this? She smiled. In case you're unable to manage your affairs. I closed the folder. I'm perfectly capable. She became irritated. You're sick. I know. You need help. I have a solicitor. Your solicitor doesn't live here. No. I smiled. But you do. She stared at me. Then she walked away. That evening, Samuel arrived. I showed him the document. He read it. She wants control. Yes. Are you going to sign? I laughed. No. Samuel looked relieved. Then I said, but I'm going to pretend I might. He stared at me. Why? Because I want to know what she does next. And that was exactly what happened. For the next week, I acted confused. I told Margaret I didn't understand the paperwork. I asked Chloe questions. I pretended to forget conversations. They began making mistakes. Small ones at first. Then bigger ones. One night, I heard Chloe arguing with Margaret. This is taking too long. He needs time. We don't have time. Why? Because the bank is going to take everything. I froze. The bank. I had never known. Chloe had debts so serious that her creditors were threatening legal action. Then I heard the sentence that explained everything. If he dies, we can sell the house. Margaret said. Not if he changes the will. Chloe answered. He won't. How do you know? Because he's sick. I walked away. I didn't want them to know I'd heard. But that night, I made a decision. The next morning, I called Daniel. I want to change my will. He asked. Are you sure? Completely. I changed everything. The Corvette went to my nephew. The house remained protected by the trust. My personal savings went to a charity my father had supported. And Margaret received only what the law required. Chloe received nothing. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted to make sure that my life's work wasn't used to rescue people who had betrayed me. But I wasn't finished. There was one final piece missing. Why had Margaret been working with Dr. Allen? Samuel found the answer. The original diagnosis. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately sent false medical information to Margaret. The doctor who had spoken to her wasn't my doctor. He was a man hired by someone else. A man who had access to my medical records. A man who had been paid. And the person who paid him was Chloe. I felt sick. My wife had believed I was dying. My stepdaughter had helped create the lie. They had convinced themselves that I had only days left. And they had begun planning my funeral before I had even finished fighting for my life. I decided it was time. I invited the entire family to dinner. Margaret seemed surprised. Why? I want everyone together. Why? I have something to announce. She looked at me. What? I smiled. You'll find out. The dinner was held on Saturday. Everyone came. My brother. My sister. My nephew. Chloe. Margaret. And Samuel. I could see the tension on Margaret's face. She didn't know why Samuel was there. At the end of the meal, I stood. I have an announcement. Everyone became quiet. I looked at Margaret. Then Chloe. Then I said, I've been told I have 3 days to live. Margaret's face went pale. Chloe looked down. I continued. That's what some of you believed. Silence. But here's the truth. I smiled. I'm not dying. Margaret's mouth opened. No sound came out. Chloe stood. What? I said I'm not dying. She looked at her mother. Margaret looked terrified. I continued. The diagnosis was wrong. Chloe began shaking. I placed a folder on the table. These are my new medical reports. Then I placed another folder beside it. These are records of phone calls. Then, another. These are financial documents. Finally, I placed down the document that mattered most. And this. I looked directly at Chloe. Is evidence that you paid someone to misrepresent my medical condition. The room exploded. Margaret turned toward Chloe. Is this true? Chloe said nothing. I looked at her. Answer her. She began crying. I didn't mean for this to happen. I laughed bitterly. You didn't mean for me to die? No. You didn't mean to take my house? No. You didn't mean to take my car? No. Then what exactly did you mean? She couldn't answer. Margaret turned to me. Arthur. I raised my hand. Don't. She stopped. You knew. She looked at me. What? You knew I wasn't dying. Her face collapsed. No. Then why were you planning? She started crying. I thought you were going to die. That doesn't explain everything. She looked down. I continued. You wanted the power of attorney. She said nothing. You wanted control of my finances. Nothing. You wanted the house. Still nothing. And you told Chloe she could have my Corvette. Margaret began crying. I was scared. Of what? Of losing everything. I stared at her. You were afraid of losing everything. I pointed around the room. While I was afraid of losing my life. No one spoke. Then Chloe suddenly screamed. You don't understand. I looked at her. Then explain it. She cried. I was drowning. That doesn't give you the right to steal. I was going to lose my company. That isn't my fault. I owed money. Still not my fault. I thought if I could sell the house. She stopped. I finished for her. You thought you'd be saved. She nodded. I looked at her. Who was going to save me? She cried harder. That question broke something inside her. For the first time, she looked like the child I had once raised. Not the woman who had planned my death. Not the person who wanted my possessions. Just a frightened girl who had made terrible decisions. I felt anger. But I also felt sadness. Because I realized that somewhere along the way, my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. I turned toward Margaret. And you. She whispered. I'm sorry. I waited. I should never have listened to her. I looked at her. You should never have believed I was already dead. She cried. I didn't know what to do. You could have held my hand. I did. You could have asked me what I wanted. I was afraid. You could have loved me. She looked at me. I did love you. I shook my head. Then why did I have to pretend to die to discover it? That was the question nobody could answer. I stood there. Then I revealed the final truth. I've changed my will. Margaret looked up. Chloe stopped crying. The house is protected. Chloe's face fell. The Corvette goes to my nephew. Her eyes closed. My savings are going to charity. Margaret stared at me. And you? I looked at her. You will receive what the law requires. She nodded slowly. I continued. Not because I hate you. Then why? Because I don't trust you. That hurt her more than anything else I had said. And perhaps it should have. The family left that night. Margaret remained behind. We sat in silence. After nearly 30 years of marriage, there was nothing left to say. Finally, she whispered, "Is there any chance?" I looked at her. For what? For us. I stared at the woman I had loved for so many years. I don't know. She nodded. That's fair. Then she stood. She walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned. I really did love you. I looked at her. I believe you. She began crying. But love without trust. I couldn't finish. She nodded. I know. Then she left. Months passed. My health improved. The treatment worked. I wasn't cured overnight. There were difficult days. There were appointments. There were medications. But I was alive. And I was grateful. Samuel remained beside me. He continued caring for the garden. One afternoon, I found him sitting beneath the old oak tree. I sat beside him. Samuel. Yes. Why did you help me? He looked at me. Because you helped me once. When? Years ago. I frowned. He smiled. When my wife died, I couldn't pay my bills. I remembered. I had forgotten. Samuel hadn't. You paid my mortgage for 6 months, he said. I did. You did. I looked down. I don't remember. That's because good people don't keep records of kindness. I laughed. Samuel continued. But I remember. I looked at the garden. The same garden my father had planted. The same garden I had cared for. The same garden I thought I might never see again. I realized something. I had spent my entire life building things. A business. A home. A family. And I had believed that the greatest danger was losing those things. But I was wrong. The greatest danger was allowing people to make you believe that your value was measured by what you owned. My wife wanted the house. My stepdaughter wanted the car. Others wanted the money. But none of them had wanted the one thing I needed most. Someone to sit beside me when I was afraid. Someone to ask, "Are you okay?" Someone to say, "I'm here." And Samuel had done that. Without asking for anything. A year later, I sold the business. Not because I had to. Because I wanted a quieter life. I kept the house. I kept the Corvette. And I kept the garden. I also repaired my relationship with Chloe. Not completely. Not immediately. Trust isn't rebuilt with one apology. It is rebuilt through hundreds of small choices. She began paying her debts. She closed the business. She found a job. She stopped asking me for money. One day, she came to visit. She stood outside the garage. The Corvette was there. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. I used to think this car was everything. I smiled. What do you think now? She shook her head. It's just a car. I nodded. Good. She smiled. Then she said, I thought you were going to die. I know. I thought I had no other choice. You always had a choice. She looked down. You're right. Then she asked, do you forgive me? I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I said, I'm trying. She nodded. That's enough. and perhaps it was. As for Margaret, we never remarried. But we did speak again. Occasionally. She moved into a small apartment. She found work. She began rebuilding her life. One afternoon, she came to my house. She stood in the doorway. I brought something. She handed me a small box. Inside was an old photograph. It was from our first Christmas together. We were young, happy, before money, before houses, before secrets, before betrayal. I looked at the photograph. Why are you giving me this? Because I realized something. What? That I spent so much time worrying about what would happen after you died. She paused. That I forgot to appreciate the years when you were alive. I looked at her. She was crying. I can't change what I did. No. But I can be sorry. I nodded. Yes. She left. I never knew whether we'd become friends again. Maybe we didn't need to. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the way things were. Sometimes forgiveness simply means allowing the past to remain in the past. I still think about that day in the hospital. The doctor telling me my future was uncertain. The fear. The confusion. The loneliness. And then I think about the moment I heard my wife whisper, 3 more days. Those words changed my life. But not in the way she expected. I didn't die. Instead, I woke up. I woke up to the truth about my family. I woke up to the value of loyalty. I woke up to the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can give them. And most importantly, I learned that sometimes the greatest second chance isn't being given more time. It's being given the chance to see the truth before it's too late. My wife thought she had only 3 days to prepare for my death. My stepdaughter thought she had 3 days to claim my possessions. They both believed my story was ending. But they were wrong. My story wasn't ending. It was beginning again. And this time, I was going to live it on my own terms. Because your life isn't measured by the house you leave behind, or the car in your garage, or the money in your bank account. It's measured by the people who stay when you have nothing left to give. Samuel stayed. My nephew stayed. And eventually, even Chloe began trying to make things right. That taught me something I will never forget. You can lose money and earn it again. You can lose property and rebuild. You can even lose a marriage and survive. But when you discover who truly stands beside you, that's something money can never buy. So if you're listening to my story and you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love, remember this. You don't have to become bitter. You don't have to become cruel. And you don't have to seek revenge. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply to stand quietly, protect yourself, and let the truth reveal itself. Because, eventually, people show you who they really are. And when they do, believe them. As for me, I'm still here. Still walking through my garden. Still sitting in my old chair. Still driving my Corvette on Sunday mornings. And every time I turn the key and hear that engine come alive, I remember something my father once told me. Son, never confuse what you own with who you are. For years, I thought he was talking about money. Now I understand. He was talking about everything. Your house can be taken. Your business can fail. Your possessions can disappear. But if you keep your dignity, if you keep your courage, if you keep your ability to love without allowing others to destroy you, then you haven't lost everything. You've still got yourself. And sometimes, that's the most valuable thing you can save.